All right. Making this video to kind of go over the mix that I did. Levels. Okay, yeah. So my mic is coming through. Cool. So I did this mix last night, um, and it was pretty challenging because for a few reasons. One, I was on my gaming computer, and I'm literally using a Sound Blaster card as my audio interface. But also because I wasn't in the studio, I didn't have all of my plugins. So I basically just quick installed my Waves plugins and my Plugin Alliance plugins, and was just playing around with it, and it's not the best mix in the world, but for a 4-hour-ish uh, mix job using a bunch of plugins that I don't normally use, I'm actually pretty happy with it. And Jacob was asking about how some of the mix elements were done, and Kala was asking some stuff. So I figured I'd just go over it, and yeah, we'll just kind of chug into it. So I'm going to go over my quick mix of this song. It's Angels and Amplifiers. I picked it up off of the Cambridge site where they provide stems that you can use with. And originally, I was really just playing around with the 1176 settings, um, just trying out new things. And then I just ended up mixing the whole thing. Um, so anyway, first things first, I always organize. I didn't have a template set up or anything, so I built this all. So real quick on this setup, I always color everything. It's consistent every time. Vocals are always green. Harmonies, I usually do a slightly different faded level of green. My drums are typically oranges. Guitars usually are red. Lead guitar I shade differently. Um, and it's funny because I actually didn't touch the piano track, and I didn't even realize there was a piano track um, until it was so pronounced in Jacob's mix. Um, so the first thing I did is I dropped the faders in and I brought kind of everything down to a certain level. And the piano's here, but it's way in the background. Um, which actually I think works for this track. It's funny because I didn't actually touch it. Because again, I was so focused on everything else. It just kind of smoothly rides the entire time. Also, you may get some crackles. You can see my CPU is working overtime here. This is not my normal studio computer, so if there are crackles, just ignore it. Most likely not in the mix itself, just in the playback. And yeah, so first things I do is organize. Base is always purple. That way I have some level of consistency. And then the first thing I do is drop everything. So started by dropping the faders down. A lot of people will say, "Oh, you got to start with gain staging, whatever." Um, I don't worry about that at all, especially in the beginning. So I've got a series of tracks here, and I've got my buses, and I will go over the buses in more detail. But it's a pretty standard bus setup. The stems came very well engineered, so I didn't have to do um, like an entire drum bus per se. I just didn't think I needed to. Um, but on the buses, tap, this is just what's feeding OBS, so you can ignore it. Master is muted only because I'm feeding it through OBS. Resend. I've got my vocal harmony bus where I'm grouping my vocal harmonies. I've got a vocal bus where everything goes in. So you'll see um, my harmony bus here goes to VX, and my vocals bus goes out to master. So everything uh, should go out to master. Except for it looks like it didn't actually send these out to master. That's disappointing. Um, so on my gaming computer, it didn't default to sending certain things out to master, so it's sending them direct out, which is lame. Which means this is going to mess with the mix a little bit. I put this through master, but I'm going to do that now, so it's actually captured. So my levels might be slightly off from where I mixed it, which is unfortunate. We'll see how that affects it. I don't know. Late last night, and I did not realize it was going to direct routing things. So, but all of this should be good. All these are going out. Okay, or a bus. All right. Well, we'll see how much that changes them. But the premise will be the same. It's just the volume might be slightly different since um, those things were bypassing the master bus. Oh, all right. So first things first. Um, so I start by leveling, just listening to what I think needs to happen. Also, I build out the arrangement of the song, just in what makes sense, so I know what's coming where. And the first thing I start off with in all of my mixes is the kick. Just works for me. So I will solo it out. I'll turn off things that I did, so I got no effects. And this is how the kick came. It's very well engineered. Not bad. Here it's done live. And so first things first, um, I've got this console on it. So this is the BX Neve. I did everything in a Neve. So that was part of what I was doing is I was playing around with some plugins that I got. I'd never used this before. So this is the BX Neve. And I'll let you hear what it's doing. A lot of it's going to be gating. This is a bypass. So you're going to hear the gate does a lot. And so yeah, as part of getting a really punchy kick is I've got overheads, which the kick is going to bleed into. There's actually bleeding a bunch of other mics, so um, it's totally fine to heavily gate the solo mic because there's more texture in other mics. So for example, if we just go to overheads and solo this out with it, gate on. So you can hear the room comes back in on the overheads. So again, that makes it so I can, in isolation, make this a little too aggressive because it smooths out in the end. And that's probably one of the things where people talk about, not mixing in isolation. I actually don't completely agree with that. I like to solo things out to clearly hear what's going on, just like we're doing right now. But then I will mix it in context um, before I make any decisions. So with the gate, you can hear a little bit of snare and everything bleeding in still. I don't gate it so much that it kills the kick transient. I want the kick to come through, but I'm not going to sacrifice the kick, make it sound perfect or too tight. Anyway, the other thing I'm doing here is primarily EQ. Out. All right, so the main thing here is that I'm boosting whatever this frequency is, 57. So that's going to add that sub kick to push the bottom end a bit. Here I am boosting just a little bit on 9K, so I won't necessarily read off everything. I'm just kind of going over this one. V gain is all the way off. This just adds noise, which is annoying. This PhD thing is really nice. Adds a lot of really good harmonics to it. So beyond that, this is flat, didn't do anything. This is mostly flat, didn't do anything. Oh, yep, it is flat. So really that's it. I'm just EQing and gating the kick on this. And the next thing I'm doing is I'm adding harmonics to help this translate on smaller speakers and just add more subtle oomph. Um, really like max bass. With max bass, so that gets the kick sitting really nice. And you'll notice when those upper harmonics are added, it almost adds that saturated like Dr. Dre, like still Dre kind of kick, like doom, doom, doom. It adds a really good punch. And again, it really helps on lower speakers, smaller speakers. And I don't think I added max bass in the beginning. I think I added that as I started mixing more things. So again, you don't want to go too crazy in isolation, but I know that I want my kick punchy. So this is probably about where it was. Start the mix and add that back in. So that's a great kick starting point to me. Add some punch, really a good foundation. Go to the snare. Let's see. That's it on the kick. I got no sends or anything. Um, I don't really mix the snare at first. It's in there. I keep everything in there low while I'm figuring out what I'm gonna do. But it's gonna be something similar with the snare. Here I have a plate send. I'm actually just sending it. I'll turn that off for now so we can hear it without. Here's how the track came. So again, it's a pretty well engineered snare track. Um, it's odd that there's no top and bottom. I usually get snare tracks with both. Not a big deal. They just didn't do it, or they combined them already. First thing I notice here is a lot of bleed. So you can probably guess. First thing I did was nuke bleed with the gate. They got to be careful with the gate on snares because there's sometimes ghost notes when they go ga and they go da 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 ga. Those low notes can get gated out. So just always make sure that you're not killing it. And again, it's better to have a little extra than to cut it too hard. But because we have overheads, cutting it aggressively is still relatively okay. So you can see I'm using the punch of the dry mic and the room to even it out. All right. So first things first, we got the gate. That's the main thing. And again, some EQ. So low body and high shimmer. Also doing a high pass here, a pretty aggressive one. I'm sorry, low pass. If I take it out, it's super crispy. Don't need that. So keep the snare out of the highs, like the really highs. And again, we have overheads. So, and then funny enough, I added torque later on. It's a plugin I wanted to play with. And interesting, and I listened to this in the mix and tinkered a little. I like the snare pitched up a little bit. So if we listen to the original bypassed, so here it's just a tiny little pitch up. And I listened to that in the mix. It has no context outside of the mix. It actually makes it kind of sound dumb, isolated. But all together, that out.
I know the seasons about to change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down. Where does the peacefulness of mine?
So it just makes it cut a little bit more and is a little more exciting. I don't know why. I just use my ears. So That was just a creative decision I did because I liked it. Um, and a final thing here is we have a relay. So I'll solo this out again, take it out. All right, again, sounds weird out of context, but look at going on here. It's really just a basic reverb with a pre-delay. Get that snappy shot. Now, I don't normally use Renaissance Verb, but it's what I had when I installed my Waves plugins, so I just used it. I tinkered until I found a setting I liked. That happened to be, these. Again, I never use this plugin, so um, really the key is I'm focusing on the mid-range, so it's not particularly dark, but not particularly bright. Um, Same thing on here, as I've got all the lows coming out, and I start to roll off around 6K, I think, which is pretty typical. All wet, and the magic is in the pre-delay. That's what makes that snapping back and forth sound. So here, it becomes too much when you go too far. I think I had around 60. So it just adds a little room. And again, if we listen to the drums all together, it just adds a little excitement. Um, and it doesn't take up too much space because I'm carving it in the EQ. Plus, I got that pre-delay that makes it snap. Um, it doesn't consume too much space or override a lot of other stuff. So that's where I'm coming on with the drums. Again, I did not mix it all the drums first. I'm just going over the drums first, since they're a pretty integral part of the mix. But yeah, I go back and forth. Like when I'm actually mixing this thing, I'm constantly shifting back and forth. I don't want it to sound like, oh, I mixed the drums first and then I mix the next element. No. Go to the overheads. This is quite interesting. So with the overheads, I've got no um, sends on there, but I do have in this order E76 preamp going into the Neve. So let's take the Neve out. Look at what the 76 is doing. This is a pretty cool plugin. I do like it. That I can actually make it bigger. Sweet. Okay. So here's dry. So it actually sounds a little out of phase to me. Um, Really extra wide. In fact, I didn't but uh, yeah, it's definitely unbalanced in the lows too. Yeehaw. All right. Yeah, and I have some master bus processing here too. So I should probably go over that. I'll go over that after the drums. Um, all right, so here's what's going on here. Add it in. Again, that's adding a little grit, um, cutting the 300 hertz a little bit. Guys, taking out some of that low mid, which a lot of times in overheads you don't need low mid. Or you don't even need lows either because it's just going to muddy up the mix. All of your low should be coming from your kick drum and your toms and maybe other various percussion you have. But on a drum kit, you don't need your bass in the room. Now, there are different methodologies to this. Like if you're doing a small mic setup, like a three mic drum setup, and you're using like a room mic that's way back off, and you're using that for your kick bottom, then absolutely you don't really have room mics. But when you're engineering the crap out of drums, have a bunch of mics all over the place, you got to carve out the frequencies that are going to collide. So even though this thing has, oh, clearly there's some weird phase stuff going on here. This has helped cleaning it up a little bit. Also, I'm compressing it, so there's width, and I'll take just a compressor out. Yeah, a lot less exciting. You can see these settings. I'm not going to explain everything. Here's gain reduction meter. You can see it's pulsing with the groove, which I think is kind of important. You don't want to destroy the dynamic. And then I've got it 50-50, so I'm parallel compressing. So I am squashing the crap out of this. Here is um, all wet. Let some transients back through. I guess I wasn't squashing it as bad as I thought it was, but it's still pretty squashed. So parallel comping that. After the parallel comp, we go into again. And I'm using the Neve on everything. Go down here. Here's without the Neve. Put it in. All right, pretty aggressive EQing here. And really, this is going to be because of how it plays with the other mics. Yeah, that's pretty dead. You can hear there's a boosting the crap out of the upper frequencies to make it come to life. And then once you add in the other two mics with it, that is a respectable drum tone. That right there is the foundation of the song. These are the most important. Now, the other stuff like the toms and the percussion and all that, yeah, it's cool. But this is the blood of the track. It's going to be the overheads, the kick, and the snare. Briefly take a look at what's going on in toms. I did actually edit manually some of the toms as I was playing around, but I decided to just go the gate route again. Play. Heavily gated. And then they'll come in. Same kind of deal. In this case, I've got Q10. I didn't like some resonance that was coming in here. So just a little subtractive EQ. Out. You hear that low rumble? Like a boom, boom, boom. It's like the tom was um, rattling the entire time or resonating. Probably because I needed some moon gel, um, or maybe some duct tape or something. So uh, not very great engineering. So I used this just to take out that constant woo, so the whole track wasn't just sitting there getting obnoxiously resonant. Not bad. And then overheads. And not a bad combination. Here, add in the 76. Out. Um, See, I'm not going crazy. Um, Especially since the crazier I go here, the more the bleed is gonna push. So as you can probably guess, I'm gating. But again, I don't gate it so hard that it kills everything else because that would kill the toms when they do come in. Here's with the gate. Not bad. Without. So you can hear it cuts out the rest of the crap. But let's listen to just the toms, how I'm messing with it. They can hear that the toms are getting hit by the gate too a little bit, but they're cutting through nicely. And again, there's overheads. Um, but really what I want is the initial strike attack bottom, which in the toms is why this is scooping a little bit. So I'm cutting out the mids at 580, boosting the crap out of the 150. So for the bottom base freak, and then boosting, yeah, what is that? 6K, 5.7. So I'm basically heavy metal scooping the tom, but not aggressively. So here is without the EQ. Adds a nice attack. That's part of the punch. So Kala was asking how I make the drums punchy. This is a big part of it. It's EQing to know that this is going to cut through. Fuck all this other stuff. All this other bleed is going to do is essentially mess up the groove by having too much stuff going on at the same time competing. So again, I don't want to cut it because if you gate it too hard, it cuts the life out of everything, and you might as well be playing sample drums. So it's a real fine balance here. I cranked this THD up. Again, I don't know exactly what it's doing. It's probably adding harmonics, like the analog gear probably would. THD stands for total harmonic distortion, which is usually how crappy your gear is. Um, it's too high when you're looking for analog gear. But yeah, it's interesting. So anyway, I'll turn it on and off. Out. Let me go. So you it's subtle, but it makes a big difference, man. I love this thing. That is really. And I'm doing not a lot here. I'm doing a little bit of a high pass. Cut the lows out at 50 hertz aggressively. That's all together. So these mics all together, overheads, toms. That's a pretty nice solid drum sound. And then the percussion track was absolutely annoying because they threw a whole lot of stuff in and it was kind of hard to filter through. Um, so I cut too much highs out after listening to it this morning. My ears were baked last night when I finished this, but I figured it'd be a good experiment. So here's with it out. Oh, just a percussion track. So it's unwieldy, man. That damn shake or that tambourine is killing me. I hate that. It's just really sharp. Like if you're gonna do tambourine in a percussive track, put them back, mix like in the room physically, or put it on a separate track for the love of God. And it might have actually been on a separate track. I think they combined some of these stems, but I could be wrong. Maybe it was just a stereo recording. That's how they got it. Anyway, this back in, you'll hear I cut the crap out of the highs. Or did I? So here's a trick. So I aggressively low pass this, but then to make up for it, I actually boosted a frequency range that I liked better, especially with that damn tambourine. All right, so here's no high pass, no EQ. So with the high pass only, now it's super dull. We don't like that. I like this frequency better in the high end. And it's a better ring. So they're horrible on their own, but together, that I actually can listen to, and it doesn't hurt me. Um, and I'm not gating on this at all. As I talked to Kala earlier, I don't actually understand what half of this means. Obviously, we have thresholds. Like this is the gate threshold and the range, but uh, I got to learn what this stuff does. I've never used this before. But yeah, that's the percussion track. In the choruses, it gets kind of busy. Sounds like a metronome clicking. Not my favorite tones, but I didn't make the song, so. Let's talk. So that's the overall drum mix. Again, I did not mix these in isolation. This is just the end result. I'm just going through it so you can kind of see where I got to in the end. From a production standpoint, actually not even production. Um, Frankly, I think the song from a production standpoint is it's very straightforward. There's not a lot of elements that come in and out. I mean, it's traditional. It's a good song. I'm not complaining about the song whatsoever. It's killer. It reminds me of Santana stuff. Really good. But in the mixing side, I didn't have a lot to really work with for elements on the production side. And so some of what I did create movement. Here's why I marked a section so I know exactly what I'm working on. Is things like this. Or here on the second verse, I pulled this percussion track back just to add them a little bit of interest to the mix. Because you can see it's steady throughout the whole thing. I didn't want to ruin the vibe, just wanted to get different, interesting in some capacity. So that's one of the things I did. And you'll see a bunch of little decisions like that here and there. So here's without disabled read automation, so it's not going to obey my volume gain automation. Obeying it. So there's a little dip right there, and in context of the mix, you'll be able to hear it. Little pullback there, so that's part of it. It's not super obvious, more of a feeling thing. It feels like this space opens up a little bit because I carved it back. And that's the only time in the song I do it. So let's look at other automation things I did with the drums. Nothing on the toms, nothing on the overheads, nothing on the snare, nothing on the kick. So really, it was just the percussion that I decided to carve out. And then I do other things there. So that's drums. Let's move on to some other elements. So vocals are a huge topic in this group. So let's talk. Actually, before we talk vocals, let's talk bass because bass is the second most important element, and actually the second thing I mixed after the kick and the snare. Because the how the bass plays with the kick drum is so important. So let's look at what I did to the bass before we go to vocals. Sorry, bait and switch. Bass and switch. Ba-dum bum. All right, here is my bass chain. Starting with the 6 console, and then Shocker max bass. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn those two off. Here is the dry bass as it came.
I know the seasons right.
Right and true. It's a direct track, obviously, so they plugged right into the mix board. Doesn't have a lot of pizzazz. I mean, it might have gone through like a pedal or something to the highs, but it just sounds like it's an active bass to me. So yeah, let's hear what it does with this on. Now I'm doing all buttons mode, so it's gonna add distortion. Sounds pretty bad on its own, frankly. That does not sound great. But again, it's about context. So first, let's add the drums in. Out. So with the drums, at least, this grit actually just adds clarity. You don't notice that it sounds bad in that you do like you do in isolation, but it just adds some oomph. Um, and I dig it. And in the whole song, of course, none of the EQ and all that's in there, so it's not going to sound good. But here's with.
It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine?
So it's pretty subtle. Just adds a little clarity. Yeah, it's more of a feel thing than oh, I hear that bass. At least to me. That's step one, still 76 on there. Step two, mess with the bass. So, and I cut the highs out of it because that grit was a little too much to me. I didn't like it. So, a little bit of the highs on that grit. I think you probably noticed a little 150 boost. And I also boosted the crap out of the 4.3 here. It is that where it was. Oh, why is the V gain up? Let's turn that down. Seriously, point. All that does is add noise. It's literally hiss. All right, and then the final thing, max bass. Again, I love max bass for adding extra oomph, especially on small speakers. A little bit. I don't go crazy here.
Keeping at the core, you know that. You know I'll always have this too.
That's another thing too. Sometimes it can help to listen to the song dim solo enabled. The dim solo makes it so the rest of the song comes in a little bit, but the strongest level is these tracks. So drums and bass are full volume. Everything else is diminished, but it's not off.
They're tearing me Where will my heart come back to life?
All right. All right, let's move to vocals. Everybody wants to talk vocals in it. Now, as you can see, this is why I say get the stems, because just trying to mix vocals with all this other nonsense, you can't carve this stuff. You got to carve around the vocal. So let's talk vocals. Got lead vocal split into tracks. And the reason I did this is for ease of mixing. So this all started off as one track, and I wanted a different sound on the verses, on choruses, and on this bridge right here. And instead of automating everything to go here and then change crazy here and then change crazy here, that's obnoxious. So on something like this where I know I'm going to carve it differently, I just split it out and literally going from one track to the other. And so these three tracks make up the lead. They're going to be very similar. I've got a bunch of comps set up, but they might not do what you think they're doing. So let's start with the verse here. And there's all sorts of automation here I'll go over. But yeah, let's start with this isolated verse vocal. And I've got a bunch of buses that things are going into. So let me kill the buses first, and then look at my signal chain here. So this time I did the blue 76. I'm not even gonna lie, I have no idea what the difference between the black and the blue are. I don't use CLA 76 ever. This is the first time I ever actually used it. I have the UA versions, um, so that's what I would normally be my go-to. But so first things first, popping it. Was here with and without the compressor.
I know the season's ripe for change. I know the season's ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged.
So aggressively leveling. Uh, Sounds good. It's not boosting the sibilance too bad. I actually didn't desib because I don't have any of my sibilance tools, and I didn't want to try to learn Wave's tool in in the middle of mixing. Um, so I've got a bunch, but I actually prefer to use Melodyne. I don't have Melodyne on this computer, so I was like, forget it. There's not the S's aren't that bad, so
Season's ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged.
these vocals were tracked excellent. Um, Here's dry completely.
Season's ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. The
There's a tiny bit of room in there, but that room is tight. It just adds a little bit of depth. Um, that's how your vocals should be tracked. You want to be able to have full control. So with the
season's
compressor,
ripe for change. It's changing all around.
Brad, that's great. EQ,
Season's ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life?
I'm really not doing that much. Not really.
Season's ripe for change. It's changing all around.
It's pretty subtle. I don't think these are even up. Yeah, there's a slight point zero 0.02 or zero point 0.2 boost low here. I don't think it's doing anything, frankly. I mean, but what you do here is the channel processing. So there is a bit of warmth that's coming in that I do like, but it's very subtle.
Season's ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine?
And especially in those low mids, there's something going on with this channel that I really dig. Again, it's super subtle. I could probably A/B these, and I might not even notice it at first. Anyway, not a lot of engineering done. Again, the vocals were mixed, or sorry, engineered flawlessly. That's great. Check to see how much hard drive space I had. Make sure I'm not killing. Yeah, I got space. That's fine. All right, so that's that.
Seasons ripe for change. It's change.
So let's see what else I'm doing. And that's going to all be in the ends here. So let's listen to the track in context.
Seasons ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down.
It sounds great. It's just dry. So first thing first, sending it to my Epic bus. Now this is actually literally the first time I've used this plugin. I got it on a sale, and it just looked like it might be an interesting way of quickly coming up with some vocals. So I have two things in here. I've got Epic, which is just that Chris Lord wave shenanigans, where it does delay and reverb together. Got it funky. And then the key piece here is I have this compressor. And in order for this to work, I need to turn this on. So you see, this is sending to the side chain of Epic. This one is sending into the side chain of the lead guitar. So I'll just leave this here. So these are both going into side chains, and then this is going into Epic itself. So I'm feeding Epic, and I'm also feeding Epic's side chain compressor to cut some of the effect when it first comes in. So without the compressor in, here's what it sounds like.
I know the seasons ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down. Where's the peacefulness of mine?
That is ridiculous. That's horrible. But when I put the compressor in, it cuts it down and then lets it release back up.
I know the seasons ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing.
All right. Huge difference. So let me isolate these so you can actually hear what's going on.
I know the seasons ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down. Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? Life.
Very, very big difference there. One is sloshy and just as horrible, and the other one is constantly riding with what's going on in context. So I actually haven't used the C1 compressor in probably 10 years. But it works like any other compressor. I was trying to find a knee setting, but I couldn't find a knee on here to adjust just how aggressively it changes. But I settled on this setting and I liked it. And I'm doing something similar with the other vocal portions of vocal chorus and vocal bridge. There's a little extra on the bridge. You can see I actually have Epic and a plate, and I'm not feeding the side chain. But I'm feeding them at much lower levels. I'm not worried about the compressor making space. Level is a lot lower. So that's the key on having the vocals sound a little polished, but not brushed by that insane amount of reverb delay. And you also hear that there's slap delays in there. So yeah, so you're hearing a little extra. Let me go over the busing here. I mentioned before that all vocals go through the vocal bus or the VX bus. On this, I'm doing two things. One, got a mag EQ for just a high air frequency. Sounds nice. And just add some crispiness. So
I know the seasons ripe for change. It's changing all around. I know the reasons you've arranged. They're tearing me down.
this sounds nice. Add some of the air frequencies without messing with the sibilants too much. Lets it cut a little better. So dig it. Other thing I have here is I have a punch delay. You know, bus here. All this is H delay set to half beats. And you'll notice, actually, look at that. Or not doing anything crazy. Really low feedback because I don't want delay trails for days. And you notice I'm automating the volume. So what I'm doing right here is I'm cutting that delay because I don't want the delay to keep trailing on this gap between this transition between the verse and the chorus. I want it to have that snap delay, but I want it to cut out. So, and this is the send for the punch level. So this isn't actually volume. I'm only engaging this H delay on tails right here. That's why you don't have all these delays right here
I know the reasons you've arranged.
not being used, but right here it pushes it in.
Peacefulness of mine. Where will my heart come?
So you hear that? It's got about three things. Some mine, some mine. So it's sounded nice in the mix. I don't want that right here. I want it tight. So I automated the volume so it sends it to the delay here, but also the delay cuts the level right there to silence.
Where will my heart come back to life? Life.
And then I open it back up right here on the one of the chorus. So that helps it have a slight amount of pause, um, which adds intensity to the track. Or not intensity, a pullback for a second. Here, let me just play it. It's easier to just show you how it sounds. So here is with it um, all in.
Where will my heart come back to life? Life. I'll go back.
See, it's got that out. Now, if I turn off read automation, play punch level, now this is just going to stay going. You'll hear the difference.
Where will my heart come back to life? Life. I'll go back.
You see that extra live that came in right before the one was horrible. Again, without.
Where will
Sorry,
my
with.
heart come back to life? Life. I'll go back.
Bam, that's punch right there. So everybody wants to have punch and they're like, saturate this and compress this and do. No, want something to be punchy, pull other shit back. It's like it's a combined thing. Like I'm not saying it's either or. Yes, compress your stuff, saturate, do whatever you want to do, but in this case, less is what makes it punchy, that gap. And it takes time and work. There's no way to do this and set some settings and let it go. You have to automate it at this level if you're going to have that level of polish. There's just no way of getting around. That's why this took me, 4 hours to build instead of 2. I was done with the core mix elements probably halfway through. Um, and again, I'm not saying this is an amazing mix. Whatever. I'm not tooting my own horn here. I do like it. I think it's a great start, especially for 4 hours of not using plugins I'm familiar with, not in my studio. Um, anyway, so that's the punch delays. You can see I don't use them a lot. I really just did it as a first element because too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing. So I add some more of the punch delays here with the chorus, but I pulled it back. I don't like to make it super sloshy, but I wanted something exciting, especially in the beginning of the song. We want to hook you, and then later on I do other things to keep your attention. That's the delays. Each one of these is about the same. You'll notice I did some leveling on one. So the reason these look different is that I have gained these clips up, such, because they were softer and they weren't cutting through the mix. So this was actually one of the last things I did. I would normally level in Melodyne. It's a lot easier, but
Bring back the light. Where is the pleasure in pain?
probably pretty subtle. But I'll just play it pre-edited and edited.
Bring back the light. Where is the pleasure in pain?
And what was originally.
Bring back the light. Where is the pleasure in pain? Bring back the light. Where is the pleasure?
And subtle, but Don't want your lead vocals dipping. So even though these are being compressed through the 1176 and relatively smooth, they still need to be right ridden. And instead of riding the fader, I actually just gained it up. Of course, gaining this clip up sends it plugins at a different level. Using the fader um, takes the final output, and you'll see over here I actually fadered it up. So I rode the fader up, but over here I decided to gain it up because I like the way it was pushing it. Yeah, it's subtle. But either way, you want your vocal to stand out. If anything is not cutting through the mix, you gotta fix that. Like here, I push this volume level up, especially right here. Here's with the automation up, and it's not a lot. It's -3.8 up there and -5.8, so it's literally 2 dBs.
Help me, I think I am falling. Does anybody hear me calling?
So does anybody hear me calling? I take that automation off, buried.
Help me, I think I am falling. Does anybody hear me calling? Help me, I think I am falling. Does anybody hear me calling?
But yeah, and this call-in, it's an exciting part of the song. This should be a little louder than the rest, and it already is. The singer got louder, the gain's a little hotter too on the original clip. So again, subtlety here, just making sure that the vocals don't get buried. I actually do that a little bit in the end too when the guitar solo comes back in to make them blend. There's not really a lot more to know about those other than the chorus vocals. Same kind of thing. I'm feeding side chains to control the insane amount of delays and whatnot that I'm putting on the lead.
I'm alright. As I pick up the pieces that are left of me, I'm alright. Being away from you, and I'll be fine. Cleaning out the corner, putting back in order.
Now, if you're listening well, you should hear that these are very different between the verse and the chorus.
Where is the peacefulness of mine? Where will my heart come back to life? I'm alright. As I pick up the pieces that are left of me, I'm
Two things there. One, there's harmony vocals. You guys come in, makes it more full. See, they're heavy on the choruses already. But also have a doubler here. Now, normally my go-to would be other doublers, but again, I only installed a couple plugin sets, so I figured, fuck it, let's find something that works. So I doubled it. It's an easy way to add some excitement in the choruses.
alright. As I pick up the pieces that are left of me, I'm alright. Being away from you, I'm alright.
Not bad. And in the mix context, I'll turn the doubler on and off.
I'm alright. As I pick up the pieces that are left of me, I'm alright. Being away from you, and I'll be fine. Cleaning out the corner, putting back in order.
So it's a lot more noticeable in isolation to me. Again, it's more of a feeling thing once it gets into the mix. So it's pretty nice cutting the lows. I don't like doublers sloshing up the low end. And that's the main thing right there. What is this? So this is a compressor sense. So this is the compressor that's controlling the epic delays. Um, and I let it control them here. Um, but actually, I'm sorry, this is a guitar control. So yeah, let's talk about the guitar compressor real quick. I have a guitar bus. Oh, I don't have a guitar bus. Oh, I normally have a guitar bus. But because there's not that many guitar tracks, really, there's this lead guitar track. Bam. So I put the compressor straight on the guitar track. And again, it's a side chain compressor to cut. If we look at one on here, this cuts guitar. So what it does in the beginning here is it makes it so the guitar doesn't come in as strong while the vocal is still singing.
This too, a little piece of you.
So I'm just feeding it, and then right here, it's going to be more noticeable because I think there's not as much overlap. But on here, there's a lot more overlap between this vocal and the guitar. So you'll hear it makes it so the guitar kind of swells in real quick
Always have this too, a little piece of you.
without the compressor.
Always have this too, a little piece of you.
Comes in, balls out, and it stomps on the trail of the vocal. Now you could automate this. You could just ride this fader and be like, "Oh, I'm going to cut it." I decided to sidechain it instead because I wanted to play with the vocals more directly.
Always have this too, a little piece of you.
So you notice a lot, especially with that wah, where it goes whack in the beginning, cut down. And then here, I actually stopped feeding the compressor because this is playing with the vocal, so I needed to do something different. And this is where I actually automated it with the fader to make the lead come up and down in the end.
Oh yeah, oh my. I will always have this too. Oh yeah, oh my.
All right, so what did I do here? I made a creative decision. I decided that while the singer is doing little ad libs and oh yeah yeah, that's not as important as this guitar coming in heavy. So I let the guitar override the vocal in the beginning.
I will always have this too. Oh yeah, oh my.
And right on that bend up, we've got important vocals coming back in on this chorus double. So I cut the lead guitar back down, making space for the vocal. Little things like that I think are extremely important. That's the difference between a great mix and a good mix is not just letting this sit here. And you'll see I cut it down a little bit more. Let's hear what happens here.
Swinging up the corner, putting back in order. You know I will always have this too, a little piece of you.
So kind of similar thing. The vocals start dabba dabbing right here, and it's frankly it's really hard to understand what the vocals even saying right here already.
But no, I will always have this too.
And no, I'll always have this too. So in order for vocal clarity, I boosted this up so in the volume right here, and I cut the guitar down, and together it opens space.
Putting back in order. You know I will always have this too. Putting back in order. But no, I will always have this too, a little piece of you.
But I didn't want it to sound like the guitars weren't ripping, so I boost it real quick and then pull it back out at the end
A little piece of you.
because we can. That's on the way out. It can share some space. So complete creative decisions here. There's no right or wrong. I like the way that that blends. And here's a reverb level on a guitar, um, which I'll get into that when I cover guitars. But you'll see I automated the reverb level to come up in the end, probably just to make it a little bit more exciting, a little bigger. This is the final chorus. We need to do something to make it sound like a final chorus and not just like somebody copy and pasted and did a lazy job. So that's the other takeaway is copy and pasted mix sections sound stupid. To everybody that's paying attention, it sounds stupid. And a lot of people want to cut corners on this. You cannot cut this corner. And I run into this all the time. People do not want to put in the work. And it makes a huge difference. Huge. So I think I'm going to leave that here for now. And I'll make a second video to go over the rest time. All right, hopefully this was helpful. It's fun for me. I liked having to doing this exercise. So till the next time. All right.